Have you ever wondered what really happens when you simply stop showing up in someone's emotional world? Not out of anger, not as a dramatic exit, but in silence, in stillness. You just let go. One day you wake up and realize that carrying the emotional weight of everyone else has quietly eroded pieces of your own soul. So you begin to detach not with bitterness, but with a quiet kind of love for yourself. You stop answering texts right away. You stop showing up for the role you never signed up for. You stop being the mirror, the crutch, the invisible scaffolding holding up someone else's life. And at first no one notices. But then the absence speaks. Your silence begins to echo. They sense the shift, not just your physical distance, but your energetic withdrawal. And that's when the unraveling begins. Because stepping away isn't just about leaving, it's about breaking an unspoken contract, one they never realized they made. And as the silence grows louder, so does the discomfort in their soul. Today we're going to explore what really happens in that quiet moment when you choose to reclaim your space and the storm it sets off in the hearts you left behind. There comes a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize you're no longer present in the same way. Not physically perhaps, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually. You begin to pull back, not to hurt anyone, not to make a point. But because something inside you whispers, it's time. You've been giving parts of yourself away for so long that you forgot what it feels like to be whole. You've played the role they needed: comforter, fixer, listener, provider, but you never got to just be you. So one day you stop leaning in. You start choosing silence over explaining, stillness over reaction. You're no longer available for emotional rescue missions. And even if no one says it out loud, they feel it. Something has shifted, something invisible yet undeniable. Because stepping away isn't just absence, it's disruption. You break the emotional circuitry others have silently come to depend on. Your presence once filled a space they never had to examine, but now with you gone, that space becomes undeniable. Suddenly they're left with themselves, and that's the part no one talks about. The discomfort they feel isn't always about missing you. It's about confronting the silence where you used to be. That silence holds a mirror. It forces them to ask, what part of me did they carry for so long? And in that moment, your quiet departure becomes louder than any words ever spoken. Most people don't understand this. They call it selfish, cold, dramatic. But the truth is, choosing to step away can be one of the most compassionate things you ever do for yourself and for them. Because sometimes the only way for others to face their own emotional dependence is in the wake of your absence. And that's not cruelty. That's clarity. When you step away, truly step away, it's not just your absence that people feel, it's the void you leave behind. And that void, though invisible, is powerful. It's not simply an empty space where you used to stand. It's a mirror that reflects what others never wanted to see. Most people don't understand this until it happens. Until you go quiet. Until you stop engaging. Until your energy no longer fills the room. At first they may call it space-time healing, but slowly discomfort creeps in. Because your presence didn't just exist beside them, it was interwoven into their sense of self. Your words, your reactions, your emotional availability served as a buffer against their own unspoken fears. And now, stripped of that buffer, they are forced to sit with what's been there all along. Their own loneliness, their own uncertainty, their own emotional weight they once unconsciously handed over to you. What's unsettling isn't your disappearance, it's what that disappearance reveals. It reveals just how much of their identity had been constructed around your existence. It reveals how much of their peace was dependent on your presence. It reveals how much they relied on you not just for support, but as a distraction from themselves. And that's why the void you leave is not neutral. It's electric. It hums with unanswered questions, suppressed emotions, and repressed truths. It's not just missing you, it's the psychological rupture of being forced to recalibrate in your absence. That's the paradox of distance. It looks passive from the outside, but internally it's an earthquake, a silent quake that shifts emotional fault lines. It demands introspection, it triggers restlessness, and it confronts people with a truth they'd rather ignore, that you were never just a person in their life, you were the space in which they hid from their own shadows. Now with that space gone, they must finally face what was always waiting in the silence. People rarely see you for who you truly are. Most of the time, they see you as a projection, an emotional screen onto which they cast their unspoken fears, desires, wounds, and needs. You become unconsciously a mirror, not because you choose to be, but because that's how human connection often operates, not as a recognition of the other, but as a reflection of the self. And when you start to step back, when the mirror shatters, they're not grieving you. They're grieving the version of themselves they once saw through your eyes. It's unsettling to realize how often we are reduced to roles in someone else's psychological narrative. You weren't just their friend, partner, child, or confidant. You were the container for their unmet expectations. You were the place where their self-worth was temporarily reinforced. You were the one who held their shame without judgment, their insecurity without rejection. But when that mirror is no longer there, when you remove your energy from the dynamic, they're forced to see what was always hidden beneath the surface. Suddenly, there's no one to validate the image, no one to reflect back the identity they carefully curated. And in that silence, in that absence, an identity crisis is born. They begin to wonder who they are without your gaze. And sometimes that question is too terrifying to sit with, so they blame you. They call you cold, distant, ungrateful. But deep down, they know the truth. Your reflection wasn't about you. It was always about what they needed to see. And now that the mirror is gone, they have to face themselves unfiltered, raw, and perhaps for the very first time. Not all connection is rooted in love. Some of it is dependency in disguise. And perhaps the most painful realization in stepping away from others is this: what you once thought was love might have been something far more conditional. Many human relationships are built not on mutual respect or soul-level recognition, but on quiet emotional contracts, unspoken expectations that one person will carry what the other refuses to confront. You think they love you for who you are, but slowly, painfully, you begin to realize they love you for what you do for them emotionally, for the stability you offer, for the way you make them feel like they don't have to look too closely at their own wounds. And when you stop doing that, when you choose your own clarity over their comfort, the illusion starts to unravel. At first, they might say you're selfish, that you've changed, that you abandoned something sacred. But in truth, they're not mourning the loss of you. They're mourning the loss of what you symbolized. You were their regulator, their emotional compass, their safety net. And your decision to step away isn't just a personal one, it's structural. It collapses the hidden framework that held their emotional reality in place. That's why it feels catastrophic to them. Because your presence wasn't just appreciated, it was depended on, even if they never admitted it. And here's where it becomes even more complex. They may have genuinely believed they loved you, and maybe in their way they did. But it wasn't unconditional, it was need. Deep, unconscious, unspoken need. And when you withdraw, that need echoes in the void like a scream with no one to answer it. It's not cruelty to walk away from that. It's courage. Because no real love should require you to disappear in order to keep someone else whole. When you step away, people don't just feel your absence, they begin to rewrite your story. But the version they craft is rarely about you. It's about them. About the story they need to tell themselves to make sense of why you're gone. Because facing the raw truth that your departure triggered something they weren't emotionally equipped to face is far too unsettling. So they create a safer narrative. One where they are the misunderstood, the betrayed, the abandoned. One where you are the one who changed, who gave up, who walked away without reason. Because that version hurts less than admitting they relied too heavily on you. That your presence held up more of their emotional structure than they could admit even to themselves. Some will glorify you in hindsight, casting your absence as a tragic loss, painting you as the one who got away. Not because they suddenly see your worth, but because idealizing you is easier than looking at their own failure to value you when they had the chance. Others will demonize you, rewriting the memory of who you were so they can justify the fracture. In their version, your departure becomes selfish, cruel, even calculated, because that's easier to accept than the idea that they were emotionally dependent on you without ever acknowledging it. This process isn't malicious, it's human. People rewrite stories not to deceive others, but to protect themselves. The mind reshapes reality to make pain tolerable. But for you, the one who stepped away, it can be deeply disorienting to see yourself turned into a symbol in someone else's unresolved narrative. Still, there is strength in knowing this. Their story about you is not your truth. You don't need to correct it. You only need to remember who you are and why you chose to walk away in the first place. Your absence doesn't just create space, it reactivates wounds that many believed were already healed. The void you leave behind isn't a blank canvas, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, people are forced to confront what your presence once helped them forget. For some, your silence echoes like abandonment. They experienced years ago wounds left by parents who were emotionally unavailable, friends who disappeared without warning, or lovers who loved conditionally. They may have buried those traumas under layers of distraction, under the illusion of control. But when you walk away, you unintentionally tear open those sealed emotional vaults. And what spills out isn't just sadness, it's fear. Fear of being left. Fear of being unworthy. Fear of facing themselves without the emotional shield you once provided. What's most haunting is that your decision to step away wasn't meant to cause harm. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about reclaiming your space, and yet the ripple effect is deeper than you expected. Because in many cases, you weren't just another person in their life, you were the bridge between them and parts of themselves they didn't want to meet. Your voice soothed their chaos. Your attention filled their emptiness. Your empathy covered their shame. And when that's gone, it's not just you they miss, it's who they got to avoid being when you were around. This is why some people react with anger. Others spiral into guilt. Some withdraw entirely, unable to process the sudden confrontation with their emotional rawness. But all of it points to one truth: your presence was doing more emotional labor than you ever realized. And now in your absence, the weight of that labor returns to its rightful owner. You didn't abandon them, you returned them to themselves. And while they may resent you for it at first in time, some will come to understand your leaving was the beginning of their healing. When you walk away, you don't just remove your physical presence, you remove the emotional gravity that once held parts of their identity in place. Whether they admit it or not, your presence was interwoven into how they saw themselves. Your energy became a part of their rhythm. Your support shaped how they moved through the world. You were the silent affirmation in their story, the one who always answered the call, who soothed the panic, who made the chaos tolerable. And now, without that anchor, they're left drifting in unfamiliar waters. The version of themselves that existed with you can no longer function in your absence. And so begins a painful, often disorienting process, reconstructing identity. Who are they without your emotional reinforcement? What parts of their confidence, stability, or even self-worth were actually reflections of you? It's a question they don't want to face because the answer often reveals that their independence was performative, their strength conditional. Your withdrawal exposes a truth they long tried to bury, that their sense of self was built in part upon your quiet, constant presence. And now, like a structure with a missing foundation, they're forced to rebuild. This is the quiet storm your absence creates. Not because you were everything, but because you were something deeply entwined with their emotional framework. And now that you're no longer there, they must meet themselves in a new way, without the buffer, without the mirror, without the safety net. Some will resist this, clinging to denial or resentment. Others will avoid the reconstruction altogether and simply collapse inward. But a rare few, the brave ones, will face it head on. They'll do the painful work of becoming whole without you. And while you may never witness that transformation, know this: sometimes your absence becomes the invitation they never knew they needed to find out who they truly are. When someone loses you, not through death, but through emotional distance, their instinct isn't always to understand what happened. It's to justify it. Because true understanding would require them to step into vulnerability, to ask difficult questions, to confront the possibility that they themselves may have played a role in your decision to walk away. And most people aren't ready for that. So instead, they construct a story that keeps them safe. A narrative where your absence becomes a betrayal, your silence becomes coldness, and your self-preservation becomes selfishness. It's easier that way because if they can make you the problem, they never have to look inward. This rewriting of your story isn't about clarity, it's about comfort. They're not trying to understand you, they're trying to protect themselves from guilt, from shame, from the collapse of the identity they've carefully curated, which may have depended on your presence far more than they realized. And so rather than sitting with the discomfort of loss, They wrap it in false certainty. They changed. They gave up. They never really cared. These phrases aren't truth, they're armor. But the tragedy is in doing so, they miss the lesson. They miss the opportunity for growth that your absence could have offered. Because if they were brave enough to ask the real questions, why did I rely on them so much? What did their presence allow me to avoid within myself? They might uncover something deeply liberating. Yet most won't. And that's not your responsibility. You don't owe them an explanation that makes them feel better. Sometimes your silence is the mirror they need most. And whether they use it to reflect or to deflect, says more about them than it ever did about you. Most relationships operate with invisible rules, unspoken agreements, subtle power exchanges, emotional roles that no one consciously acknowledges until they're broken. And often these structures remain hidden because they work. You show up when you're needed. You calm storms. You fill in the emotional gaps. You become the steady presence that keeps everything in balance. But when you step away, that balance collapses. And in the rubble, something startling is revealed. The relationship was never as mutual as it appeared. Beneath the surface of connection, there was a system one where you unknowingly held up the weight of someone else's emotional world. It's in your absence that the true architecture becomes visible. Suddenly, the emotional labor you performed silently, consistently, and without acknowledgement can no longer be denied. Your kindness wasn't just appreciated, it was essential. Your support wasn't just welcomed, it was depended on. And your withdrawal doesn't just cause sadness, it causes instability, even resentment. Because the moment you step away, you expose the quiet truth: the relationship functioned as long as you upheld your role. Without your presence, the structure cracks. This is why your absence feels threatening, not because you're cruel or vindictive, but because it removes the hidden scaffolding. It challenges the illusion of equality. It confronts them with the reality that what they called love might have been built on asymmetry, on your silence, your self-sacrifice, your unacknowledged emotional labor. And that realization isn't just painful, it's destabilizing. But for you, this clarity is liberation. It's the moment when the truth emerges from the quiet. You were never just a person in their life. You were a pillar. And when a pillar steps away, the structure either collapses or is finally rebuilt with honesty, balance, and accountability. When you finally step away, it feels like an ending. But what most don't realize is that it's also a beginning on both sides. For them, your absence becomes a trigger, a fracture in their carefully built emotional structure. It pushes them into questions they've avoided for years. Why did I need this person so much? What part of me was being held together by their presence? But you're not untouched by this decision either. Stepping away may seem like a single act, but it unfolds over time. It ripples into your mind, your heart, your soul. And in that silence, after the noise, after the guilt, after the mourning, you begin to feel something new: freedom. Not the kind that comes from escape, but the kind that comes from returning to yourself. This is the paradox of detachment. While it disrupts others, it also awakens them. Some may spiral, some may resent you, but a few, the ones ready to grow, will rise. Because sometimes it takes losing the emotional scaffolding to realize they can build a foundation of their own. Your absence becomes their mirror, and while it may hurt, it also becomes the catalyst for self-responsibility, for reclaiming their emotional autonomy, for learning to stand without leaning. You might never see this transformation. It might happen in silence years later when your name is just a memory. But know this: your decision wasn't wasted. It was a spark. Because true healing often starts in discomfort, and your detachment, as misunderstood as it may seem, might be the most generous act you could ever offer. Not by staying, not by fixing, but by letting them feel the weight of their own becoming. And in doing so, you also begin your own, not as a savior, but as a sovereign soul finally coming home to itself. Stepping away is not the easy path, it's the quiet rebellion. It's the moment when you stop asking for permission to exist on your own terms. When you stop performing for the roles others have placed on you and begin to choose truth over acceptance. It's easy to stay in patterns that feel familiar, even when they silently erode your sense of self. It's easy to keep showing up for relationships where you're seen only as a function, not as a person. But walking away, that takes a different kind of strength, the kind born from a deep, aching clarity, the kind that says I matter even if no one else validates it. You see, choosing to step away isn't abandonment, it's reclamation. It's the act of peeling back every layer of who the world told you to be and finally standing in the quiet center of your own identity. And yes, it may come with backlash, with confusion, with others projecting their disappointment or pain onto you because they don't understand. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. You are not here to shrink yourself so others can remain comfortable in their illusions. In a world where emotional availability is often exploited, where kindness is mistaken for compliance, and where being there for others means abandoning yourself, stepping away is sacred. It's a declaration I will no longer disappear just to keep the peace. And while it may leave others unsettled, it leaves you whole. Because in the end, this journey isn't about being who others need you to be. It's about remembering who you were before the world asked you to forget. And sometimes the most profound healing begins the moment you walk away, not from them, but back toward yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. In a world that teaches you to equate love with sacrifice, choosing yourself can feel wrong. But it isn't. It's clarity. And clarity often looks like cruelty to those who depended on your confusion. The truth is, many people didn't love you for who you were. They loved what you did for them, how you held them together. When you step back, they're forced to face the parts of themselves they avoided by leaning on you. That discomfort isn't yours to fix. Ask yourself honestly, where am I showing up out of obligation, not love? Where is my peace being traded for approval? Real connection doesn't collapse when you set boundaries, it deepens. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is let go. In that space, something more authentic has a chance to grow.